Hi, this is Paul Lucas for Jumpstart Nature Photography. In this segment, we'll be covering Part 1, Creative Use of Light. As always, in the introduction, you can see my work at paullucasphotography.com. I'd be happy to speak at your library or other organization for no charge to give a Jumpstart Nature Photography presentation. I'm also available for hire for classes and workshops. And if you'd like to get a copy of any of the presentations or have any questions around photography, please send me an email. My email address is paul@jumpstartnaturephotography.com. And I'd like to encourage you to contact me for no charge to get a critique session on some of your photographs that you've been taking out in the field. Please contact me if you have questions or are interested. Please contact me at paul@jumpstartnaturephotography.com. So we're coming to the end of some of the course material. We've gone through the craft of photography, composition or the art of photography, and now we're going to talk about light and the creative use of light in creating our images. So we'll touch on a few things. What is light? Thoughts on light in photography. Dynamic range, light direction, light quality, and overcast versus shade. So what is light? Visible light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? And it has color to it. So during the day, at midday, it tends to be a brighter blue. At dusk, we get, or sunset, sunrise, it's a warmer color. At dusk, it's a bluer color. Shade has a different color cast than bright sunlight. And remember, a lot of the light that we see is reflected. A lot of the colors are also reflected either off other objects or they're filtered through the atmosphere. So anyway, just a little bit of information as to where light comes from, where it falls in the realm of physics and the electromagnetic spectrum. So to think about light, understanding light, first we have to look at it objectively. So what does that mean? It says try to learn to see how your camera sees light. So as I've mentioned, the human eye is a wonderful instrument. And the brain, we can focus on things and see all kinds of details and huge contrast range from very dark to very light scenes. We have a lot of capabilities in our eyes, and our cameras really support, and the lens support a subset of that capability. So you have to kind of think about, what does a camera see? We have tools within the camera. We'll talk about that in some of the creative use of light presentations, histograms that will help us to understand our exposure and how the camera is, quote, kind of seeing the light. But we have to kind of, in our mind, through experience, visualize how that light will work in our creation of an image and how we might work with that light in the post-processing part of the processing with Lightroom or Photoshop. And as I mentioned, our eyes are, wonderful. We have a huge tonal range. We can see many more stops of light than typically our cameras, though they are improving. So in thinking about light and using it creatively, where is the light in relationship to your subject? Is it front lit, back lit, etc.? So front lit means I'm looking at the subject. The light is actually, so the subject's in front of me, and the light is actually coming over my shoulder. So it's lighting the front of the object. Backlit means I'm looking at the object, and the light source, the sun typically, is behind the object. That's backlit. And then, of course, side lit means exactly that. The light is coming from one side or the other. Is the sky overcast? An overcast day with diffuse lighting is good for shooting plants and other kinds of vegetation. Is it a clear and sunny day? What does that mean to the color and quality of light? What is the quality of light? Is it soft and diffuse, like on an overcast day? That's often good for photographing a wide variety of subjects. Is it harsh and contrasty? If it's midday, it's a clear blue sky. It's a very bright, washed out. The colors are kind of washed out. The color temperatures in the blue range. It's very contrasty, very dark shadows and very bright spots. Are the colors warm or hot colors? So some things to think about, where the light is and the color of the light. How can you use the light to make an image you have in mind, right? Is there a range of light within your camera's ability to effectively capture the image? So remember, think about the location, the color of the light, the quality of the light, and how that's going to help the image you have in mind. And is the range of the scene that you're trying to compose, is it fit within the range of capability of your cameras? Most modern DSLRs and mirrorless cameras that have interchangeable lens have a dynamic range of 12 to 14 stops. They do very, very well. And Lightroom and Photoshop are very powerful in processing those raw file images, right? We keep all of our dynamic range if we shoot RAW to let us manipulate that entire range of f-stops that our camera is capable of capturing. There's often more data there than you realize. And remember, the dynamic range is the details we can see from the darkest to the brightest elements. So from very deep dark shadows to very bright reflection of light off water, etc. The human eye can see about 24 stops. Cameras, depending on if it's a point and shoot, the size of the sensor, the quality of the software, processing, etc. within the camera has a range of between 5 and 12 stops. Some of the newer cameras recently out are claiming in the 14 stop range. We can also use high dynamic range photography techniques to expand the dynamic range of the camera. So that's maybe a subject for a future topic. It's a little more advanced subject. And remember, our eyes can only see a subset of any number of stops of light that the eye can see. So camera sees light as a level. Pure black has no detail, white has no detail. In between is where all the information is, and that's what we're trying to capture in our image. And just a simple 11 stop range of lights, just to understand it'll show up on your monitors differently, right? The pure black and pure white may not show up exactly at that, but that's kind of the range of tonalities that cameras see and understand, right? Even though we have color in them, the color actually, if you turn to black and white, will represent one of these different shades within the tonality range. So it's key to kind of think about and look at the light, the direction, the quality, how that affects your exposure and composition. And maybe you'll purposely, as I talked about in part 4 of the art of photography, the compositional elements, I talked about the decisive moment. So maybe you'll want to go out and shoot at particular times of the day to make use of the light, that decisive moment. So you can observe and use the light you have. You can shoot any time of the day, but mostly I find early morning and late evening often the best times to shoot. You can shoot mid-morning, you can shoot in the middle of the day. There's often compositional opportunities anytime. Overcast days, of course, you can shoot any time of the day. So again, think about the direction of light, right? The light falling on the scene. We talked a little bit about this already, side light, backlight. So we'll see some examples. So here's a simple example of a front lit scene. You can see that the light is falling over my shoulder. I'm looking at the subject. It's lighting the front of the subject, which is those concrete slabs. And just as a compositional element here, I used a neutral density filter. You can see it's a 6-second exposure time, and I was trying to, again, smooth out the sky and the clouds just to kind of have a textural contrast between the color and textures of the rock versus the sky and the clouds. This is a side lit scene. The side light is coming from the left side. You can see the trees, kind of almost a distinct line lighting it from across, cutting them in half. So side lit from the left-hand side. And I'll back up a second. So this is probably mid-afternoon, I think, is when I took that shot. So the light's still pretty bright. I mean, it's shot in the middle of the day, but it's still, I think it makes for a good composition. This is not mid-morning really. Still some good golden light. It's shot in the fall around October, I believe, is when I took the shot. So still some nice warm colors, but we're starting to lose the really rich warm colors we'd have early in the morning. This is a sunrise shot. So this is backlit. The subject's in front of us, but it's lighting. The light is coming from the back of the subject, which works perfectly fine. And this is what will happen in compositions where you have sunrises or sunset. But as you can see, some other compositional elements, a little change in foreground, middle ground, background, textural changes between the foreground, middle ground, and background. You can see A little bit of a diagonal line on the beach. The beach is not, I didn't set up the shot so that the water line and the beach is exactly squared up to give it a little more dynamic element. And the way that I've pointed the camera lens to more directly look at the sun and let the old pier, those old posts that had a wooden pier there, they go off at kind of an angle to the left. And I purposely shot it at a slower shutter speed to kind of smooth out the texture of the water a little, to reflect the different shades of yellows and orange and pinks in the water as well. Okay, so light quality. The quality of the light changes throughout the year as well as the day, even minute to minute during sunrises and sunsets. So you've seen in another compositional discussion a similar shot to this, just as in a contrast. So here's the shot you've seen before, and here's the other shot. Now they're slightly different compositions, but the point is here is to let you see how quickly, within a matter of a few minutes, you can see the light had come on the fountain, but you can see how quickly the color of the light changed, and it makes a dramatic difference. So it's kind of which composition do you prefer better? I think both work pretty well, but again, you can see the change in the light quality at sunset, how it changes very quickly. Again, another sunrise shot. Sunrises tend to have warm tint, but they have a huge dynamic range, right? Because we have the sun coming up and we're shooting right into it potentially. And we have, the objects that are not well lit yet. So just something to keep in mind, that there's a large dynamic range. The sun is always going to be, there's no way we can capture the sun unless we have very specialized filters like astronomers use to observe the sun. The sun will just be always a very white, bright blob. Here again, sunset, warm tint, strong shadows, lots of contrast, good for landscapes with interesting skies, right? So we can see the trees are in the background are very black, the water and the sky are lit up, so very big dynamic range, big contrast there. Twilight, it's mostly reflected light. Can be a warm tint to the light of it, blue tint. Kind of depends on the time of twilight. Low contrast because we don't have any real bright subjects in it. Here's a shot early morning. The sun is above the horizon, but it's still a light is low at an angle, so it's less warm, but still can get some great warm, more yellowish, a little brighter kinds of shots. Another late morning shot. So I should say the direction of the light here now, because I'm looking actually south, and the sun is rising on the left. That's east. So this is actually a side lit shot, for example. Mention that. This is a front lit shot. The sun is actually behind me over my shoulder, lighting the subject. So the UV, the bluish element, the ultraviolet, is kind of brightening up the picture. You're getting more reflections. If you want to remove some of that, remember we talked about a polarization filter. We're getting more harsh lighting and shadows. Not too bad yet in this photograph. One thing, again, I'll mention about the decisive moment. I intentionally shot this at a slower shutter speed, try to smooth out the water a little bit. There might be a little bit of motion in the willow to the right, and in the distance, but I don't mind that in this photograph. I intentionally looked at this scene, and I saw that the sun was I had a few moments where the sun was just lighting the edge of that first large rock closest to me. So that I did not make any changes in Lightroom to brighten up that rock. That was intentional. I saw that. That's another example of a decisive moment, noticing that lit that rock, because those rocks are kind of in a more shaded area. As you can see, it's a little more shady than as you move across the pond or lake there, and the back part of the scene is well lit. This is shot midday, pretty much. It's the sun's right overhead, late summer, but midday, lots of UV light. Now here's a great example where a polarization filter would have maybe provided A little more a little more pop in the colors. I still think this works pretty well, but if you notice the leaves on the tree closest to me have kind of that sheen to them or a shininess. So that would have helped, a polarizing filter would have helped eliminate that and make some of those colors pop a little bit better. And notice I just want to mention compositionally, I have a little diagonal path going through there, a leading line. I've intentionally cut off the trees at the top because the sky was just a very bright blue. It would have been a very distracting compositional element in the sky. So I purposely shot those trees the way they are cut off. I wasn't in such a position, that tree on the far left, I couldn't cut that tree off more. I wanted to leave a little space there for the trunk of the tree. So overcast and shade. Overcast is good because it diffuses the sunlight without really changing the color. And midday is really a great time for shooting flowers or grasses and trees. Shade exists every day. It has a blue tint and it can even have harsh shadows. And shade can create or have a higher dynamic range. So examples of a photograph during, it's mid-morning, but you can see there's a lot of bright shadows in here, and it has a very high dynamic range, meaning the background is much brighter than the foreground, and it kind of, in my opinion, is a distracting element, those big shadows. Now I've lightened that image up a little. The shadows are a little darker. Versus taking the scene with a little bit different perspective, but on an overcast day. So same shot, same stone, a little different perspective, but shot on an overcast day. And you can see that there's less contrastiness, more evenness of tonality as far as from bright to dark. Now, I did compositionally go from the idea of having a great depth of focus or field to one where I wanted to emphasize the stone in the front of the path, right? So here's like an f/16 aperture setting. This is f/2.8. All right. Another shot in overcast and shade. So these are not shot on the same day, 2 different days. This is a very bright day, and you can see lots of shadows, lots of contrast. The leaves on the willow closest to us are more brightly lit. There's very dark shadows under the bridge. It goes completely to black. Contrast this shot with a day. A little different, slightly different perspective. I tried to keep it as close as possible. Pretty close, where it's an overcast day. So everything's much more evenly lit as far as the diffuse lighting. It even kind of, because we lose some of those contrasty shadows, it makes the colors a little bit richer and more vibrant. So I'm trying to remember, I don't remember the day, it's later in the year. This was shot in June. I remember it was a strange June day where we actually had fog in the morning, kind of cool temperatures, and an overcast day. Okay, so here's an example of a photograph in the shade. And our eyes do a good job of color correcting pictures. Our cameras do not. So I'm going to go back and forth, the before and after. So here it is with shade, uncolor corrected, and here it is with a color correction. So hopefully this shows up in your monitors. You notice the stones go from kind of a purplish, bluish tint to a brownish, warmer color. Oops, sorry, went the wrong way. So look at the bench, even the pot in the side, the trees, you'll see how going back and forth between these two photos. So I corrected the color cast by changing the color temperature, right? So we can take photos in the shade, but we would have to visually correct those to get the proper color temperature that our eyes would see. Our eyes wouldn't necessarily see that blueness, but just so you know the difference between shooting in shade and overcast and the effect. Okay, I kept hitting this is the end. Well, this is the end now. And I hope you've learned something about the creative use of light. We're going to come back and we have a couple more segments to this area, and which is really part of the art and composition of photography, looking how we can express ourselves, creating our vision, driving our vision, right? All those things. So I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.